On Mother's Day, my son Julian's silence was deafening. My daughter-in-law, Valerie, then posted a family tribute, excluding me entirely. They erased me from holidays, birthdays, and even their children's lives. I watched, I waited. They thought I was gone, but some echoes reverberate forever. If you've ever felt invisible, like, share, and let me know where you're listening from. My story is just beginning. For 5 years, I had been a ghost in my own home, a phantom limb on my family tree. At 62, Eleanor was my name, but Grandma felt like a forgotten word, a relic from a past that no one else seemed to remember. The silence in my house was no longer peaceful. It was a gaping maw swallowing me whole. It started subtly, a slow fade rather than a sudden cut. My son, Julian, once so attentive, began to call less frequently. Our conversations, once meandering and full of shared laughter, grew clipped, rushed, punctuated by the faint sounds of his bustling life in the background, a life I was increasingly excluded from. Then came the first holiday, a Thanksgiving 5 years ago that felt less like a gathering and more like a deliberate omission. "Mom," Julian had said, his voice strained, "we're just not going to have enough space at Valerie's parents' place this year. It's really packed." He sounded apologetic, but the words still landed like stones. I nodded into the phone, a hollow ache beginning in my chest. "Of course, dear," I'd managed, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. "I understand." I spent that Thanksgiving alone, a half-eaten plate of lukewarm casserole, my only companion, clinging to Julian's casual promise, "Next year, Mom, for sure. We'll make it up to you." The promise felt flimsy even then, a delicate thread stretching across a growing chasm. Next year came, and with it, Christmas. No invitation arrived. The holiday lights, usually a source of joy, seemed to mock me with their cheerful twinkle. I finally called Julian, my heart a nervous flutter. The sound of children's laughter, unmistakable and joyous, filtered through the phone. Sophie and Leo, my grandchildren. My throat tightened. "Oh, Mom," Julian exclaimed, sounding flustered. "We're just having a small, intimate thing this year. Valerie's family, it's just getting so big." Small, intimate. The words hung in the air, implying I was simply too many people. I quietly murmured my goodbyes, the receiver feeling heavy in my trembling hand. I looked around my living room, at the carefully wrapped presents for Sophie and Leo, gifts I had picked out with such love and anticipation, now destined to remain unopened beneath my lonely tree. The realization settled heavy upon me. I was expendable. This pattern, once a shock, soon became a predictable rhythm of my life. Every birthday, every holiday, the same silent treatment, the same polite but firm exclusion. But it wasn't just silence. Julian's wife, Valerie, unwittingly became the cruel chronicler of my erasure. Her social media posts, public for all to see, were a gallery of my absence. There she would be, smiling, surrounded by family, a perfectly curated image of domestic bliss. "So grateful for my wonderful family," she'd caption, tagging everyone present, her parents, her siblings, Julian, even distant cousins, everyone but me. It was a casual cruelty, a digital slight that burned deeper than any spoken word, deliberately showcasing my non-existence in their world. I remembered Sophie's 8th birthday party vividly. The vibrant photos on Valerie's page depicted a bouncy castle, a rainbow cake, and a dozen laughing children. My neighbor, Mrs. Albright, a kind woman with a perpetually worried frown, stopped me by my mailbox a few days later. "Oh, Eleanor, I saw the pictures of Sophie's party. It looked wonderful. I didn't see you there, dear. Everything all right?" The question, so innocent, twisted a knife in my gut. "Oh yes, Mrs. Albright," I lied, my voice a little too bright. I wasn't feeling quite up to it that day, a bit of a bug going around. Julian and Valerie insisted I rest. The lie tasted bitter, but it was easier than admitting the truth, easier than facing the shame. I was growing used to fabricating stories about a family that no longer included me. But the cruelest blow came 2 years ago, on Mother's Day. The phone remained silent. Not a call, not a text, not even a card. The day passed in an agonizing stillness, each ticking second a fresh wave of disappointment. I watched the clock, clinging to the hope that Julian would remember, that he would call, even late. He didn't. The next morning, as if to twist the knife, Valerie posted her annual Mother's Day tribute. A collage of photos featuring her own mother, her grandmother, even an aunt. "To all the amazing mothers in my life," the caption gushed. My name, my face, my very existence as Julian's mother was conspicuously absent. I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. That evening, I sat in the dim light of my living room, flipping through old photo albums. There was Julian as a baby, his tiny hand clutching in my finger. Julian on his first day of school, beaming. Julian graduating, his arms slung around my shoulder. Memories flooded me, vibrant and painful. Had he forgotten all of this? Had Valerie's carefully constructed narrative completely overshadowed our shared past? The pain was a physical ache, a constant throb. I realized then that I couldn't keep fighting for a place that had been so deliberately removed. I couldn't keep chasing after people who didn't want me. It was a slow, agonizing decision, but I finally understood. I had to step back. I had to protect what little dignity I had left. The ache of loss remained a dull, persistent throb, a constant reminder that something precious had been taken from me. And I knew deep down that this was just the beginning of a much longer, darker story. The sharp, insistent ring of my doorbell on a Tuesday morning sliced through the quiet hum of my house. It was an unexpected sound, usually reserved for delivery drivers or Mrs. Albright, never for family. My heart, despite years of quiet disappointment and deliberate exclusion, still did that foolish little leap within my chest. Could it be Julian? Had he finally come to visit, to bridge the chasm that had grown between us? I smoothed down my dress and hurried to the door, a fragile thread of hope flickering to life. Standing on my porch, bathed in the cool morning light, were Julian and Valerie. Their faces, however, were not softened by a desire for reconciliation. They were cold, businesslike, almost stern. Julian, usually so quick with a perfunctory hug or a peck on the cheek, stood rigid. "Mom," he began, cutting straight to the point without a single pleasantry, "we have a situation." My hopeful flutter died. This wasn't a visit. It was an intervention of some kind. Valerie stepped forward, her eyes red-rimmed, though I couldn't tell if it was from genuine distress or theatrical effort. She launched into a tearful confession, a torrent of financial woes that left me reeling. Debts. Substantial debts. 200,000, she rattled off, a terrifying figure composed of credit card max-outs, personal loans from various unsavory sources, and a mountain of medical expenses from an undisclosed illness she'd apparently battled in secret. The number hung in the air, a stark, brutal contrast to the frugal life I had always led. $200,000. I, Eleanor, who meticulously balanced my checkbook, who turned off lights in empty rooms, who had lived within my means my entire life, could barely comprehend such recklessness. My mind spun, trying to grasp the magnitude of it. "Creditors are threatening everything, Eleanor," Valerie sobbed, dabbing at her eyes with a perfectly white handkerchief. "Our house, Julian's business, everything could be taken from us." A wave of concern, maternal and instinctive, washed over me. "Oh dear," I began, trying to sound practical. "Have you thought about financial counseling? There are services that can help you consolidate, negotiate with creditors." Julian cut me off with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Mom, we've explored all options. There's only one solution, one way out of this mess." He paused, his gaze hardening. "You need to sell your house." The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. My house. This house, the home I had shared with my late husband George for 34 years. The place where Julian had grown up, where we had celebrated countless Christmases, where George had taken his last breath in our bed. "My house?" I echoed, my voice barely a whisper. "Julian, this is my home. It's too big, you say? It's not too big for me. It holds 34 years of memories. It was George's last home. It's sacred." Valerie, suddenly composed, stepped in with a chilling nonchalance. "Eleanor, it's not like you have anyone to leave it to anyway." Her words, sharp and casually cruel, implied not only that I was alone, but that my life held no legacy, no future heirs. Julian remained silent, his gaze fixed on some point beyond my shoulder, his quiet acquiescence to Valerie's barb more painful than if he had uttered the words himself. My heart hardened. The years of quiet resentment, the pain of being systematically excluded, welled up inside me. "How dare you?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "After 5 years of making me invisible, after keeping my grandchildren from me, after treating me like I'm nothing more than a burden, you come here and demand my home?" Julian shifted uncomfortably, finally meeting my gaze. He invoked the oldest, most hypocritical card in the book. "Mom, family helps family. We're in trouble, deep trouble. We need your help." "Family helps family?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Is that what you call it, Julian? Because for 5 years, family has meant being erased from your lives. Family has meant silence on holidays and birthdays." Valerie rolled her eyes, her feigned tears vanishing completely. "Honestly, Eleanor, you're being so dramatic. We just needed space, okay? We had our reasons." Her tone suggested my feelings were an inconvenience, my pain an overreaction. A cold calm settled over me. "What happens?" I asked, my voice low and steady, "if I say no?" Their faces, which had been a mask of strained politeness, fractured. Julian's jaw tightened and Valerie's eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine anger replacing the manufactured distress. "If you say no," Julian began, his voice losing its persuasive edge and taking on a steely threat, "then Sophie and Leo will be homeless. They'll lose everything. Is that what you want, Mom? To see your grandchildren on the streets?" The emotional blackmail was blatant, a desperate attempt to weaponize my love for my grandchildren. Valerie added the final brutal twist. Her eyes gleamed with an icy malice. "Besides, Eleanor, it's not like you're going to live forever." For 3 agonizing weeks after Julian and Valerie's shocking ultimatum, sleep became a stranger to me. My nights were a torment of tossing and turning, haunted by their demands and Valerie's chilling final words. "It's not like you're going to live it forever." Self-doubt gnawed at me. Was I being selfish? Should I sacrifice my home for my grandchildren, even if it meant giving in to such blatant manipulation? But then Valerie's other cruel remark would echo in my mind. "It's not like you have anyone to leave it to anyway." That was the anchor that pulled me back to reality. They didn't see me as a mother, a grandmother, or even a person with feelings. I was a resource, a means to an end. My home, my memories, my very existence were just collateral in their desperate game. It was a Tuesday, a day I had marked for a routine checkup with Dr. Ramirez. The familiar drive home, the comforting turn onto my street, usually brought a sense of peace, but as I pulled into my driveway, a chilling sight greeted me. My front door stood ajar, the sturdy wooden frame splintered as if by a violent kick. My heart, already heavy with the weight of recent events, began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew deep in my gut that this wasn't accidental. It wasn't a random break-in. Yet, a desperate part of me still hoped for an innocent explanation. A gust of wind, a faulty lock. Stepping inside, the hope evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. My living room, once a sanctuary of comfort and cherished possessions, was a war zone. Furniture lay overturned, glass glittered like malevolent jewels across the floor, and the familiar floral pattern of my favorite couch was brutally slashed. My television, a recent gift from George before he passed, lay shattered, its screen a spiderweb of cracks. The destruction wasn't random, it was methodical, almost artistic in its cruelty, clearly intended to send a message. I walked through the house in a daze, my mind struggling to process the senseless violence. In the kitchen, every dish, every glass, lay in glittering fragments on the floor. The refrigerator, once a symbol of domesticity, had been toppled onto its side, its contents spilling out in a grotesque mess. Walls were pocked with deep holes as if from a baseball bat, each impact a punch to my gut. The dining room was even worse. My antique family dinner table, a cherished heirloom that had hosted generations of joyful meals, was split down the middle, its polished surface scarred beyond repair. My mother's china cabinet, where delicate porcelain had stood untouched for decades, was a heap of shattered wood and glittering ceramic shards. Heirlooms, irreplaceable links to my past, now lay in sparkling ruin. In the hallway, a gallery of framed photographs, moments frozen in time, had been systematically destroyed. Frames were smashed, glass shattered, and faces defaced. The worst was a large portrait of George and me, smiling on our wedding day. His face, once so full of love and life, was now ripped, a cruel testament to their contempt. Upstairs, the desecration continued. Mattresses were slashed, feathers spilling out like snow. Dressers were overturned, clothes strewn haphazardly. George's anniversary jewelry box, a small, intricate wooden piece he'd given me on our 25th anniversary, lay in pieces, its contents gone. Suddenly, a commotion at my front door. Mrs. Albright and Mr. Davies, my neighbors, rushed in, their faces etched with concern. "Eleanor, dear, we heard such a racket earlier," Mrs. Albright exclaimed, her voice trembling. "Around 11:30, wasn't it, Arthur?" Mr. Davies nodded grimly. "Saw a few men. They had bats, I think. Didn't look right." Then Mrs. Albright's gaze sharpened, her eyes widening in recognition and horror. "Eleanor," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "One of them? He looked just like your Julian." My worst fears, the ones I had tried to deny, solidified into a terrifying certainty. It was him, my son. He was capable of this. I walked back to the living room, noticing the specific targeting of sentimental items. George's favorite armchair, now ripped and torn. My china, my family photos. And then I saw it. My beloved baby grand piano, a gift from George on my 40th birthday, the instrument where I had taught Julian his first clumsy notes, was now a twisted wreck of splintered wood and broken strings. It was a brutal personal attack. Nestled among the ruined keys was a letter hastily scrawled in Julian's familiar handwriting. It was an ultimatum, a final unyielding demand. Pay the $200,000 within 72 hours or face worse consequences. The message was clear, chilling, and utterly devoid of any remaining pretense of familial affection. And then, something unexpected happened. Amidst the case, the estimated $50,000 plus in damage, the wreckage of my life, I started to laugh, a low, guttural chuckle that grew into a full, booming laugh, echoing through the desecrated rooms. They had targeted my possessions, my memories, my home, but they had made a grave mistake. They didn't know. They couldn't know. I hadn't lived in that house for 3 months. My true treasures, my most precious belongings were safe. The house was empty of what truly mattered, and now I held all the cards. The scene of my shattered home, the chilling letter from Julian, and the sudden booming laughter. All of it made sense only by flashing back 6 months earlier. It was a warm September evening, the kind that still clung to the remnants of summer. I was driving to Julian and Valerie's house, a small, hopeful smile on my face, with a brightly wrapped package for Sophie's 7th birthday nestled on the passenger seat. They had invited me for cake and ice cream, a rare invitation that still made my heart ache with a fragile joy. As I pulled into their driveway, I could hear voices drifting from the backyard. The back gate was ajar, and as I approached, my name, clear and unmistakable, floated into the evening air. My footsteps faltered. "Honestly, Julian, the old bat is so stubborn," Valerie's voice, sharp and dismissive, cut through the twilight. "Sitting on that house, worth almost $400,000 when we're practically drowning." My breath hitched. The old bat. That was me, and my house, the home I cherished, was being openly discussed like a commodity. Julian's reply was laced with frustration. "I know, Valerie. She's just so attached to it. Says it's full of memories. It's not like she'll ever sell it willingly." Then another voice joined in, calm and speculative. It was Neil, Julian's business partner, whom I had met a few times at family gatherings. "There are always ways to motivate elderly people to make sensible decisions, Julian." My heart began to pound, a frantic drum against my ribs. Motivate. Elderly people. Sensible decisions. They were discussing me, their mother and grandmother, as if I were a problem to be solved, an obstacle to their financial gain. "What do you mean, Neil?" Valerie asked, a sudden spark of interest in her voice. "Well," Neil mused, "subtle harassment for one. Make her feel unsafe in her own home. Make the maintenance case seem overwhelming. A few broken windows, perhaps, or a recurring plumbing issue. Nothing too drastic, just enough to make her want to leave. A cold tendril of fear snaked around my heart. Broken windows, harassment, Julian, my son, listening to this without a word of protest. So she'll just hand us the money then? Valerie's voice was eager, almost gleeful. Julian let out a chilling laugh, a sound devoid of warmth or humor. She won't live forever, Valerie. This would just speed up the timeline a bit, wouldn't it? The casual cruelty of his words, the dismissal of my life, my eventual death, as a mere timeline to be sped up, sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't the son I had raised. This was a stranger, cold and calculating. Neil's voice cut in again, a note of practical concern. How much time do we have, Valerie, before those creditors really start breathing down your neck? Valerie sighed dramatically. Not much. A month, maybe two, before they take serious legal action. And Julian, honey, I had to borrow a little from the company account to keep them at bay last week. Just a little. Julian's tone instantly turned sharp. You what? Valerie, that was reckless. If Neil finds out, it could ruin everything. He already knows, Valerie retorted, her voice dripping with resentment. That's why he's here. A heavy silence descended, broken only by the chirping of crickets. Then Julian spoke again, his voice low, firm, and utterly devoid of emotion. All right, we need to accelerate the timeline. She has to sell that house. And we'll give her encouragement. His voice turned even colder, more calculating. The kind that makes her realize she doesn't have any other choice. My hands were shaking violently as I carefully backed away from the gate. Each step felt like walking through quicksand. The cheerful birthday present for Sophie, clutched in my trembling hands, now felt like a cruel joke. I couldn't confront them. Not then. The shock, the betrayal, the sheer depth of their malice left me speechless, paralyzed. I simply left the present on their doorstep, unheard, unseen, and drove home in a daze. That night, sleep was impossible. The overheard conversation replayed in my mind, a chilling soundtrack of their greed. But beneath the terror, a steeliness began to form. They saw me as a fool, an old woman easily manipulated. They would soon learn how wrong they were. The very next morning, I made a series of phone calls. By noon, a discreet, highly recommended security company was installing small, inconspicuous cameras throughout my house. Motion sensors, hidden lenses, and a direct feed to my phone. When the technician asked about the sudden interest in security, I feigned a casual air. Oh, you know, these neighborhood break-ins, I'd sighed, shaking my head gravely. You just can't be too careful these days. Little did they know I wasn't worried about random intruders. I was preparing for a very specific kind of predator. If you're finding my story compelling, then you won't want to miss what happens next. Please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you know, and subscribe so you don't miss any future updates. Your support means the world, and it helps me share my truth. Now back to how they thought they were so clever. Over the next few weeks, the subtle harassment Neil had suggested began, just as I had anticipated. My mail started arriving tampered with. Envelopes were resealed unevenly, magazines went missing, and bills arrived suspiciously late, incurring penalties. Each incident on its own could be dismissed as a postal error or a simple oversight, but when pieced together, they formed a chilling tapestry of deliberate interference. Then came the phone calls. My landline, an anachronism to most, became a source of dread. Wrong numbers that never spoke, heavy breathing that lingered before disconnecting, and silent hang-ups. It was a psychological campaign designed to erode my sense of security, to make me feel constantly watched, perpetually unsafe in my own home. They wanted me to believe I was losing my mind, that I was too old and vulnerable to live independently. In November, I returned home from grocery shopping to find my back door ajar. My heart hammered against my ribs, a familiar frantic beat. I braced myself for the worst, but a quick scan revealed nothing missing. Yet things had been subtly moved. A lamp was slightly off-center, a stack of books rearranged. Up in my bedroom, dresser drawers were ajar, papers on my desk rifled through. My belongings, once sacrosanct, had been handled by unknown, invasive hands. It was unsettling, violating, and deeply personal. Each of these incidents was small enough to be dismissed by an unobservant person, a series of minor annoyances rather than outright threats. But I wasn't unobservant. I knew the pattern, I knew the motive, and most importantly, I knew their game. What they didn't know was that every single one of these harassments was being meticulously recorded. My discreet security system, installed just after that overheard conversation, captured everything. By December, I had hours of incriminating footage. Julian's car parked down the street at odd hours, his figure sometimes seen lurking near my property. Julian and Valerie, occasionally on my porch, pretending to knock or leave something, while their eyes scanned the house. Even Neil, Julian's business partner, was captured on video, subtly testing the rigidity of my windows, checking the back door. They were casing the joint, learning my routines, confirming my absence. The most crucial recording came on a cold January evening. Julian and Valerie, believing I was on a month-long trip to Florida visiting a fictional cousin, unlocked my front door with a key they must have copied years ago and walked right in. Their voices, captured clearly by the hidden microphone in my living room, were casual, almost bored. "God, this place is so creepy," Valerie declared, her nose wrinkled in distaste. "It's like a museum of old lady stuff." Julian chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Well, it won't be for long. Once it's ours, I'm gutting the whole place. We should clear at least $600,000, even after paying off your debts." 600,000. The number was a stark reminder of their avarice. Then Valerie picked up a framed wedding photograph of George and me, a beautiful moment from decades ago. She held it up, scrutinizing it with a detached air. "Should we keep this for sentimental value or just throw it out?" she asked Julian, as if it were a meaningless trinket. Julian didn't hesitate. His reply was swift, brutal, and chilling. "Throw it out. I want to start fresh when this place is ours. No reminders of the past." That moment, that casual dismissal of my entire life with George, was the final straw. It solidified my resolve. They weren't just after money. They intended to erase me completely, to destroy every trace of my life, my love, my very existence within these walls. My house wasn't just a financial asset to them. It was an archaeological site of a life they wanted to bury. The very next day, I began my preparations in earnest. I started searching for a new, smaller apartment, something modest and safe. Over the next several weeks, under the guise of spring cleaning and donating old items, I secretly, meticulously, moved my truly valuable possessions. Not just the monetary valuables, but the irreplaceable ones. George's cherished letters, our wedding album, the delicate porcelain doll my grandmother had given me, the jewelry box he had made with his own hands. Each item was carefully packed, labeled, and moved to my new, undisclosed location. I left behind only replaceable items, furniture I could easily part with, things that held little true sentimental value. And then, I upgraded my security system. I didn't remove the old one, I simply enhanced it, ensuring all footage was not only stored locally, but also transmitted instantly to secure cloud storage. Their inevitable next move, I knew, would be more aggressive, more destructive. I was ready. I was waiting. The inevitable escalation arrived in early March, just a few days after Julian and Valerie delivered their $200,000 ultimatum. I watched them through my cameras and through the grapevine of neighborhood gossip, like a hawk observing its prey. Their desperation was palpable, a frantic energy that radiated from them. They were running out of time, their financial noose tightening, and I knew their next move would be the big one, the one meant to truly break me. My security system and a few well-placed inquiries revealed their crude preparations. Neil, Julian's business partner, was seen talking to a group of men near a day labor hiring site. Julian himself, perhaps underestimating the trail he left, purchased 3 new baseball bats on his credit card, a transaction I was privy to thanks to an old joint account we still shared for emergencies, though he hadn't used it for anything other than this recent purchase. They weren't exactly criminal masterminds, but their intent was clear. They were planning a significant act of vandalism, a theatrical display of force meant to terrify me into compliance. On that fateful Tuesday morning, the day of my doctor's appointment, I played my part perfectly. Before leaving the house, I made sure to leave a casual voicemail for Julian. "Julian, dear," I'd said, my voice light and cheerful. "Just calling to let you know I'm off to my checkup with Dr. Ramirez. Should be back by lunchtime, and then I have a few errands to run. Hope you're having a good day." I wanted them to believe they had the perfect window, an unimpeded opportunity to unleash their wrath while I was conveniently absent. The night before, I had meticulously installed several additional, even more discreet cameras. These weren't just for general surveillance. They were positioned to capture every possible angle of the impending event, especially the front and back entrances. I wanted undeniable proof, a clear narrative of their depravity. But I didn't stop there. I also reached out to an old acquaintance, Detective Sullivan, a retired police officer who had specialized in domestic crimes during his long career. He understood the nuances of such situations, the subtle threats, and the need for irrefutable evidence. He knew how easily a scared old lady could be dismissed. On the morning of the attack, as I drove away from my house, Detective Sullivan was already across the street, nestled discreetly in an unmarked car, professional video equipment at the ready, capturing the entire unfolding scene from a different, wider perspective. I was creating the ideal scenario for them and a perfectly laid trap for them to reveal their true monstrous nature. My 911 call, made with a feigned tremor in my voice just minutes after receiving the alert from my cloud-based security system, brought the police to my doorstep faster than I could have anticipated. Officer Delgado and Officer Brooks arrived, their patrol car lights flashing against the splintered doorframe. Officer Delgado, a kind-faced woman, immediately stepped forward. "Ma'am, are you injured? Are you all right?" she asked, her eyes scanning me for any signs of distress. I maintained my calm, carefully constructed demeanor. "No, officer, I'm fine. I was just at a doctor's appointment." I returned home to find this. My voice wavered just slightly, just enough to convey shock, but not hysteria. Officer Brooks, a younger, more stoic man, had already walked further into the living room, his flashlight beam sweeping across the devastation. He let out a low whistle, clearly disturbed by the scene. "This is extensive, ma'am," he stated, his voice tight. He turned back to me, his gaze serious. "Whoever did this wasn't just robbing you. They wanted to hurt you." "Yes," I confirmed, my voice a quiet, firm whisper. "Yes, they did." Officer Delgado pulled out her notepad, her pen poised. "All right, ma'am, let's get your statement. Do you have any idea who might be responsible for something like this?" The question hung in the air, a silent invitation. This was it. This was the moment I had been preparing for. Officer Delgado's question hung in the air, a pivotal moment in the drama. "Ma'am," she asked gently, her pen still poised over her notepad, "do you have any idea who might be responsible for something like this? Any enemies?" I took a deep breath, the taste of bitter irony on my tongue. "Yes, officer," I stated, my voice steady, though my heart was still thrumming. "I know exactly who did this. It was my son, Julian Holloway, and at least 3 other men he hired. My neighbors, Mrs. Albright and Mr. Davies, saw them." The 2 officers exchanged a quick, knowing glance. Accusations against family members, especially sons, were always complicated, often dismissed as emotional outbursts. I saw the skepticism, the unspoken assumption that I might be distraught, perhaps confused. Officer Delgado softened her tone. "Ma'am, are you absolutely sure about that?" "Completely sure," I replied, meeting her gaze directly, "and I have proof." I led them past the wreckage of my living room to a hidden closet under the main staircase. Inside, nestled among old coats, was the discreet, powerful main recording device for my security system. "This system," I explained, gesturing to the small box with its blinking lights, "has been recording for 6 months. Every movement, every sound around and inside this house. And it uploads automatically to secure cloud storage. So even if they had found and destroyed this, the evidence would still exist." Officer Brooks, who had been silent up to this point, raised an eyebrow. "6 months? Ma'am, why would you be recording for 6 months?" My gaze hardened, because I knew this was coming. I began to show them everything. First, the grainy but clear footage of Julian and Valerie entering my house with a key in January, believing I was in Florida. Then clips of Neil, Julian's business partner, surveying my property, testing doors and windows. And then the audio recordings from the backyard of Julian, Valerie, and Neil discussing ways to motivate elderly people. And Julian's chilling laughter as he spoke of speeding up the timeline for my demise. The officers watched, their expressions shifting from skepticism to grim understanding. But the pièce de résistance, as I had orchestrated, was Detective Sullivan's high-definition video, recorded from across the street this very morning. It showed Julian Holloway, my son, directing 3 other men with baseball bats. It showed them systematically destroying my home, a clear, brutal ballet of violence. The audio, crisp and damning, captured Julian's voice, cold and ruthless. Make sure you get everything. I want her to know she has no choice now. Officer Delgado shook her head in amazement. Ma'am, she said, her voice filled with a professional awe. This is one of the most well-documented cases of domestic vandalism I've ever seen. This is multiple felonies easily. But I wasn't finished. I walked over to a small, untouched desk in the corner of the dining room, a space I had meticulously cleared of anything valuable, and produced a thick, neatly organized folder. There's more, I said, handing it to Officer Delgado. Inside were meticulously gathered financial records, documented evidence of Valerie's embezzlement of $75,000 from Julian's business, forged credit card applications in Julian's name, and printouts of hundreds of harassing phone calls traced back to burner phones. Officer Brooks, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up, stunned. Ma'am, he asked, his voice incredulous, how did you gather all of this? This is extensive. I hired Detective Sullivan, a retired officer specializing in these kinds of cases, I explained calmly. He helped me put it all together. I wanted to be ready. The officers exchanged another glance, this one filled with respect and a touch of disbelief. Officer Delgado made a call for backup, and a few minutes later, 2 more patrol cars pulled up. After a brief conversation with Adir's colleagues, Officer Delgado returned to me, her face grim. Ma'am, she said, we've run their names. Julian Holloway has an outstanding warrant for assault from a previous incident. Valerie Holloway is wanted for fraud in 2 other states. And Neil, your son's business partner, has a lengthy criminal record, including several counts of grand larceny and intimidation. The tangled web of their deceit, far more extensive than I had initially known, was unraveling before my eyes. Just then my phone rang. Julian. I looked at Officer Delgado, who nodded. Put it on speaker, she instructed, pulling out a small voice recorder. I answered, my voice steady. Julian? His voice, initially laced with a sickening, feigned concern, came through the speaker. Mom, oh my God, Mom, I just heard about your house. I'm so sorry, are you okay? Who would do something like this? I remained silent, allowing him to dig his own grave. The officer stood by, recording every word. As I said nothing, his fake concern rapidly dissolved, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. Mom, are you listening to me? What do you mean you're not answering? We need that money, you old hag. I told you, you have no choice. If you don't give us the $200,000 in 72 hours, this is just the beginning. You think this was bad? I'll burn the whole place down with you in it. His voice was a torrent of venom, a full, undeniable confession of his involvement in the vandalism and a terrifying threat of further violence. The recording device clicked, capturing every chilling syllable. After Julian's final venomous confession, Officer Delgado looked at me, her expression a mix of professionalism and genuine sympathy. Mrs. Holloway, she said, her voice firm, with this evidence, we have more than enough to arrest all involved. They're looking at serious prison time. She then requested multiple units for coordinated arrests. Soon my quiet street was no longer quiet. It filled with the flashing lights of police cars, a surreal carnival of justice unfolding outside my vandalized home. For me, those flashing lights were not about revenge. They symbolized accountability. They were about taking my power back, reclaiming the agency that had been so cruelly stripped away from me for years. Julian and Valerie had made a grave mistake. They had confused my kindness with weakness, my silence with stupidity, and my patience with helplessness. They had underestimated me, an old woman they thought they could easily manipulate and erase. Officer Delgado explained the legal process, which, to my surprise, sounded remarkably swift. We'll have them in custody within hours. Arraignment should be by tomorrow, and with the severity of these charges and their existing records, bail is highly unlikely. A sense of profound relief, unlike anything I had felt in years, washed over me. Thank you, officer, I said, my voice thick with emotion. She offered a small, knowing smile. Don't thank me, Mrs. Holloway. Believe me, with this kind of compelling evidence, believing you was the easiest part. I took one last long look at my destroyed house, the shattered glass, the ruined furniture, the pockmarked walls. But in that moment, I no longer saw ruins. I saw a testament to my resilience, a physical marker of a dark chapter closed and a clear path forward. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the definitive beginning of a new one. I was ready. 8 months later, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves on my new apartment balcony. I was enjoying my morning coffee, the sun warm on my face, when a letter arrived. The return address was unfamiliar, stark, and institutional, a state correctional facility. It was from Julian. I held it for a moment, then set it aside, unopened on a small table. Some conversations, I realized, were simply over. The trials had been swift, almost brutally efficient, thanks to the overwhelming evidence. Julian received 2 years for felony vandalism, criminal conspiracy, and elder abuse. An additional 6 months were tacked on for the prior assault charge Officer Delgado had uncovered. Valerie, facing a mountain of evidence for her financial misdeeds, received 18 months for embezzlement and fraud. The worst part for her, I imagine, was the revelation that upon her release, she would face immediate deportation due to her illegal immigration status, a fact I had learned during the proceedings. Neil, Julian's business partner, and his hired associates received sentences ranging from 6 months to a year, a testament to their complicity. But my real victory wasn't seeing them incarcerated. It was the profound realization of my own strength, the quiet power I had rediscovered within myself. I had always been resilient, but years of subtle abuse had chipped away at my self-worth. Now it was whole again, stronger than ever. The insurance settlement for the house was surprisingly generous, $75,000, more than enough to cover the damage and then some. I could have rebuilt, restored it to its former glory, but the thought of living in those walls, haunted by the memories of betrayal, felt wrong. Instead, I decided not to repair it. I sold the house as is to a young couple, wide-eyed and excited, eager to take on a renovation project and make it their own. It felt fitting, a passing of the torch, a new beginning for a home that had seen too much sorrow. My new apartment, smaller and filled with only the treasures I truly valued, became my sanctuary. It was a place where I woke each morning without the familiar dread, where the silence was truly peaceful. My life finally was truly my own, unburdened by the parasitic demands and cruel manipulations of others. The dust of the legal battles settled, but the process of rebuilding my life was just beginning, and I soon discovered I wasn't as alone as I had felt for so many years. The day after the arrest, Mrs. Albright appeared at my apartment door, a steaming casserole in her hands and a look of profound regret on her face. "Eleanor, dear," she began, her voice thick with emotion, "I'm so terribly sorry. We saw things, heard things, but we didn't know how to intervene. We thought it was family business." Her words echoed what I soon learned from other neighbors. Many had witnessed Julian's intimidation tactics, the odd comings and goings, the subtle harassment. They had seen but hesitated, fearing to intrude on what they perceived as private family matters. But Mrs. Albright, with a newfound steel in her gaze, spoke for them all. "Family business doesn't excuse criminal behavior, Eleanor. It never does. We should have protected you better. We will do better." Her apology, genuine and heartfelt, was a balm to my soul. Inspired by their renewed connection and a desire to help others, I sought out local support groups and quickly connected with other women who had experienced similar situations of elder abuse or family betrayal. We formed a weekly coffee group, a safe space where we shared our stories, offered support, and found strength in our collective experiences. It was a revelation to realize how many silent battles were being fought, and how much power there was in breaking that silence. I also reconnected with old friends. Susan, Brenda, and my sister Catherine, who had drifted away over the years, returned to my life. Each of them in their own way admitted they had sensed problems, felt the unease of my strained relationship with Julian, but hadn't known how to act or what to say. Now their presence was a warm comfort, a reminder of enduring love. For the first time in decades, my phone rang with genuine invitations to lunch, to movies, to simple chats. I felt wanted, truly wanted, rather than just needed for some purpose. But the most unexpected and profound connection came in the form of my grandchildren, Sophie and Leo. A few months after Julian and Valerie's incarceration, I received a call from Sophie's school counselor. Sophie, she explained, was having behavioral problems, and during their sessions, she had spoken often and fondly of her grandmother, with the help of Child Protective Services and the wonderful foster family. The Taylors, I began a delicate process of reestablishing contact. Initially, visits were supervised, hesitant, filled with unspoken pain. Slowly, carefully, trust began to mend. The children were initially angry and confused, reeling from the sudden upheaval of their lives. But gradually they opened up. Sophie, now a little older and wiser, confessed through tears that she missed me terribly. Leo, still young, simply wanted me to read stories and do puzzles with him, just as we used to. I never poisoned them against their parents. Instead, I spoke truthfully, yet gently, about Julian and Valerie's bad decisions and the consequences that followed, reassuring the children that none of it was their fault, that they had done nothing wrong. One afternoon, Sophie, her eyes wide with a question that had clearly been weighing on her, asked, "Grandma, did Daddy hurt your house?" My heart ached for her innocence. "Yes, sweetie," I confirmed. "He did. He got very angry when I said no to something he wanted." Sophie thought for a long moment, then looked at me, her young face etched with an understanding far beyond her years. "That's not how you're supposed to treat people you love," she declared. These difficult conversations, facilitated by the Taylors, proved healing for all of us, forging a new, real, and healthy family connection rooted in honesty and love. 18 months after the initial vandalism, I attended Sophie's 10th birthday party, held in the Taylors' warm and welcoming backyard. A photo from that day, framed on my desk, captures Sophie's genuine smile as she blows out her candles, Leo laughing beside her and me, truly peaceful, watching on. It was a true new beginning, a testament to hope and healing. My new life blossomed with unexpected joy. I embraced new interests, watercolor painting, a book club, and volunteering at the local animal shelter. These activities brought new friendships, connections built on shared interests and mutual respect, rather than obligation or bloodline. I also started traveling, something George and I had always planned to do. Italy, Ireland, Greece. The world was vast and beautiful, and I was finally free to explore it. One quiet evening, months after its arrival, I finally opened Julian's letter. It was short, a clumsy apology expressing remorse for his actions and a faint remembrance of the loving child he once was. I read it, felt a pang of complex emotion, and then placed it in my small, cherished jewelry box alongside George's old watch and a locket. It was an ending of sorts, not a forgetting, but a definitive closing of that chapter. And as I closed the box, I realized that I was finally complete. I was finally free to be exactly who I was meant to be, unburdened and truly wonderfully alive.